Friends, welcome. This is the news program that blends truth, faith, and a touch of courage, without the musket fire, of course. So get ready with taffy pullers. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. I'm Radio Free Mormon. Today's date is February 10th, 2025. I am joined, as usual, by my able compatriots, Rebecca Biblioteca and Mr. Bill Reel. How are you doing?
We're hanging in there.
Doing great.
Wow. Okay, great. I'm bringing the enthusiasm to tonight's show, I can tell.
Exactly.
We've got a lot of great stories for you tonight, which we'll be covering. And let me see if I can find those. No, that must be yours, Bill. We have two sets of slides, actually.
There it is.
There's one that I can turn the pages on and the other that I can't. And you can guess which ones Bill prefers I use. But here we go. Top stories tonight. Saints and sinners, the dichotomy within the Mormonism. The Mormonism? Who wrote this?
It shouldn't say the Mormonism. It's been a long day, but let's just go within Mormonism.
Okay, saints and sinners, the dichotomy within Mormonism. Next story. Can Mormons bet on the Super Bowl? You bet. New CSA, which stands for child sex abuse, civil case filed against LDS Church. If you have any issues listening to that kind of stuff, you might want to stop listening before we get to that point. Fairview, Texas Temple lawsuit update. You can only guess who'll be bringing that to us. If you guess Rebecca Biblioteca, you go to the head of the class. And finally, Apostle. That's what they say. That sounds provocative. Bill Reel will be filling us in on that news story by the end of the show. But starting off tonight, we have a story about a snowstorm sweeping the East Coast. And then another story that I think, is this yours, Bill?
This is not me.
No, you were going to read this RFM really quickly. It was just a little update that we got, kind of sad, really unfortunate breaking news at the last minute.
Oh, well, that's what that was then. Those were the weather conditions.
Exactly.
That this plane went down. It was flying to Alaska from someplace in Canada across the water. Is that right? I heard about that in the news.
Yeah, and we just learned that there was a sitting LDS Bishop that unfortunately was killed on that flight. So,
the Bishop of how did you find this out, Rebecca? You are a true Latter-day Nancy Drew.
Well, I found it out and then I confirmed it. So this is unfortunately the case. He is the Bishop of the Mount Baldy Ward in Eagle River Stake in Alaska. And unfortunately, he was one of the 10 that lost their lives in this plane crash. So that's sad.
His name was J.D. Moncour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is sad news.
Yeah.
All right. I expect that when they recover his body, there will be all these footprints over his back from all the atheists trying to get to the front of the plane. Who was it who said that? Is that Elder Pearson who said that?
No, it was President Nelson.
President Nelson?
No. The atheists were afraid on his flight. It was what's his name? Your favorite.
Chad Whitbeck?
No. Who you always compare to Banana.
Brad Wilcox.
It was Brad Wilcox, and it wasn't a plane, it was a bus. He said when the bus goes down, it's the atheists who trample everybody else to get out. They don't stop and help anybody.
When a bus goes down?
Yeah.
Is that like off a cliff and down? Because usually they just stop and pull over to the side of the road.
I don't know, but it's a very unfair characterization of atheists, I believe.
Well, thank you at least for letting everybody know what I was referencing.
Yeah, I did know.
All right.
And I can't believe you said it, but okay.
Bad boy. Saints and sinners, good fellas. What's up with this?
Okay, so let me go back one. So there were several stories in the news this week that had to do with people getting in trouble with the law that were our Latter-day Saints who were in authoritative positions or some sort of position that the church had placed them in, that they had oversight over people. So we'll go into that. I also thought it would be nice tonight to spend some positive time talking about some of the good the church is doing in the world and to acknowledge that. And so this section is titled Saints and Sinners. It's based on sort of the theme of the Bad Boys movie with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith on the left, except there you see LDS missionaries, and on the right, Goodfellas, and those guys are supposed to be general authorities serving the church. But just run-of-the-mill folks. So,
Bill, you know that in the movie Goodfellas, the Goodfellas weren't really good.
and I know that, but in this, they're not really good either. So just
Oh, okay.
FYI.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
All right. So let's start off with the bad boys.
Mhm.
First off, this article was in the Salt Lake Tribune. Utah woman sues polygamous Kingston Group, alleges she was coerced into marrying uncle at 16. And so a Utah woman has filed a lawsuit against members of the Kingston Group, a polygamous sect also known as the Davis County Cooperative Society. Good thing that Kingston isn't a victory for Satan, because that's also another long word to have to say, another phrase that's long to say. The lawsuit alleges that she was coerced into underage marriages and subjected to years of sexual abuse and forced labor. The Kingston Group founded in the 1930s, has faced previous accusations of child abuse, incest, and financial exploitation. Some acorns don't fall far from the tree. The current lawsuit brings
I don't think any of those acorns have fallen far from the tree.
except for the Community of Christ.
They're still on the tree.
The Community of Christ, I think, rolled quite a ways away. The current lawsuit brings renewed scrutiny to the group's practices and the broader issue of abuse within polygamous communities. So that story is a little bigger, and so I wanted to go into a little more detail about it. The plaintiff, Catherine Nichols, claims that she was compelled to marry her uncle, a man significantly older than her, under the directives of the group's leadership. She alleges that the coercion was facilitated through psychological manipulation and threats of spiritual condemnation. Sounds a little bit like Lucy Walker's story.
I was thinking of Rigdon, Nancy Rigdon as well. Imagine if Nancy Rigdon had brought a lawsuit against Joseph Smith, and would it look something like that?
Yeah, and it would. Tactics purportedly employed to ensure compliance with the group's marital customs. The lawsuit further contends that the Kingston Group enforces a system of arranged marriages among close relatives, including uncles, nieces, first cousins, to maintain genetic purity. I don't know if they understand how the science works on this stuff. This practice...
Genetic purity is not always a good thing. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
This practice, according to the plaintiff, has resulted in a range of genetic disorders and health complications among children born within the group. Medical professionals have noted that such consanguineous unions, I'm probably saying that wrong, can increase the risk of inherited conditions due to the limited genetic diversity. The Kingston Group, a secretive polygamous sect based in Utah, has faced previous allegations of underage and incestuous marriages. Despite these accusations, the group publicly denounces child marriage and asserts that its members are free to choose their partners. However, former members and critics argue that there is a pervasive culture of control and coercion within the group, particularly concerning marital arrangements.
Oh, Bill, I was thinking about something else when you were at consanguineous.
Yeah.
But the sanguine there is from blood. So in other words, close blood relationships.
Yeah, blood marriages, close relative. Yep.
It's like the great houses of Europe all marrying each other back in the day, and everyone had hemophilia.
Yeah. In response to the lawsuit, representatives of the Kingston Group have reiterated their stance against child marriage and coercion, emphasizing that all marital unions within the group are consensual and entered into by adults. They have also highlighted the group's commitment to religious freedom and the right to practice their beliefs without external interference. Legal experts suggest that this lawsuit could have significant implications for the Kingston Group and similar organizations. If the church finds in favor of the plaintiff, it may prompt increased scrutiny of the group's practices and potentially lead to further legal challenges. And they've sort of stayed under the radar. We don't really hear much about them. They're not real large in size, and so people have sort of just ignored them. But things like this could put them more in the spotlight. And we've already seen what's happened in national media with TV shows and the like when things like this come to the surface. So additionally, it could influence public policy discussions regarding regulations of religious groups and protection of individuals from coercive practices. I think that's far-fetched, but that idea was mentioned in one of the articles. The case also brings to light broader issues related to religious freedom, individual autonomy, and the state's role in regulating religious practices. And I'll just note that when you deal with one topic, you do have to be careful that, especially if you rewrite any laws or are trying to pass legislation, that the language you use doesn't apply to other groups who are also asking for extenuating circumstances and things that they do as well. I'll just note here at the end, as the legal proceedings unfold, the plaintiff's allegations will be examined obviously in detail, and the Kingston Group's practices will obviously come under increased scrutiny. I bet you will see articles laying out their history, how they came to be, and what it is that makes them different from the rest of the Latter-day Saint faction. And I expect to see that sort of in Latter-day Saint circles as well as in national media, if that story is picked up on. Next, I want to talk for a moment about a former Latter-day Saint bishop down in my neck of the woods charged with sexual abuse of a teenager. I just want to note, this article was in the Deseret News. This is not normally the kind of article the Deseret News would cover. And I just want to say kudos to Dennis Romboy and to the Deseret News for being willing to cover a story that shines a light on sexual abuse allegations being levied against at the time, sitting bishop. And so I'll just want to note that and say thank you for at least covering it and being willing to put it out there. In a separate incident, a Latter-day Saint bishop, Mark, and this is this article from the page from the slide before, a Latter-day Saint bishop, Mark Lenhoff Stevens from Washington, Utah, that's where I live, has been charged recently with the sexual assault crime of forcible sodomy. The former bishop is accused of using his ecclesiastical position in 2006 to exploit a member of his congregation, leading to criminal charges and community outrage. This case highlights concerns about potential abuses of authority within religious institutions, and specifically, it highlights the concept that we have lay leaders still in Mormonism who are, for the most part, entirely untrained, who still are not mandated to have a second adult in the room anytime they have a conversation with someone who is underage or someone who is vulnerable or at risk, one of those populations. And so we certainly can do a better job there. John Doe, this was an article that just came out on Floodlit. And this just came out in the last couple of days. I think this was on maybe the 7th of February. This is John Doe. They don't know who it is because the victim alleges and has placed a lawsuit against the LDS Church, alleges that when he went through the temple for his endowment, when the washing and anointing ritual took place, he was abused. This occurred inside the Los Angeles, California temple. And this is in a 2025 lawsuit against the LDS Church, with one man sexually assaulting the alleged victim while performing the washing and anointing ritual in the temple. There was a second man, he says, that was in there that witnessed it. And anybody who's gone through the washing and anointing, especially if you went in the prior to a lot of the changes that have taken place over most recent years, you would have wore a shield. There would have been more than one person that sort of rotated with the other to perform the ordinance. You would have had grown men reaching under that shield and touching various parts of your body. Nothing that would constitute sort of genitals, but close enough with promises that go along with those organs of the body. And this victim alleges that the second person witnessed what had happened and did nothing about it, and that he went into the rest of the endowment ceremony believing that the sexual abuse was actually part of the ordinance, and hence he couldn't say anything without throwing his loyalty to the church away in doing so. And so he felt like he had to keep quiet, and only in the last few days has the news surfaced of him filing a lawsuit against the LDS Church. And then, so those are some of the bad things that are happening, and I just want to note some of the good things that are going on as sort of a juxtaposition, because I think we do often point out the things that are going on in Mormon news, and often they have a negative connotation to them. And so the first one, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints donated an iMac, 2 MacBooks, and 2 iPads, not that big of a deal, but to Safe Haven Guam Pregnancy Center, providing essential technology to help clients access vital health information and resources as they prepare for parenthood. They've donated a ton of wheelchairs, 1,500 wheelchairs across Europe in 2024, adding to the over 750,000 wheelchairs they've provided globally since 2001. So kudos to the LDS Church for that. In Serbia, we went over this news, I think, a few weeks ago, or at least mentioned it. In Serbia, the church, the University Hospital there, named its new video endoscopic center after Brigham Young, the church's second president, in gratitude for the church's donation of advanced medical equipment. That's going to help them out quite a bit. So again, kudos to the church. And then we gave the church some flack during the Los Angeles fires, mainly because they were more worried about getting lights off the local Christmas tree and the local Christmas decorations off the building. And I just want to note that since then, the church has ramped up its response, providing aid to those impacted by the Los Angeles fires. Efforts include distributing food, water, and opening church facilities to serve as shelters. I had read somewhere that they had given like 1.2 million to help out with this disaster. So again, kudos to the church. And then I think this is the last one. Furthermore, the church has provided medical equipment to health centers in Ghana and Bolivia, aiming to improve healthcare delivery and patient outcomes to these regions. These donations are part of the church's broader strategy to support global health initiatives. And I'll just finish here by saying that while we at the Newscast have been critical of the LDS churches, we have shined a light on its unhealthiness and the way in which it interacts with the world and with its members. It is important to acknowledge that these positive actions also occur. The church's increased focus on humanitarian aid reflects a commitment to global welfare that is increasing annually. We hope to see continued progress, as there is a long way to go where we, the Mormon Newscast, aspire for a future where the church's actions align with its values that we can all be proud of, even if such were to take a long time. And I think we are a long time away from rooting out all of the unhealthy. But again, I give an applause to them for all the good that they do in the world. And I want to note that while they have a ton of money and they could certainly do more, that we shouldn't diminish the positive effect that the good that they do has on people all over the world. And so again, kudos to them. And then before you get into that, I just want to stop and check with the two of you. In terms of temple workers being alleged to sexually abuse you during the washing and anointing, here we have another bishop who is alleged to have done forcible sodomy on a teenager. And then you've got this Kingston Group, which in some ways reflects sort of some of the things we used to hear coming out of the Warren Jeffs group there in Colorado City. Your thoughts on maybe the three stories on the bad side and what kind of spaces Mormonism in all of its variations creates that allow for these kinds of things to just happen over and over and over again. I'll stop there, and I guess I'll get your thoughts on that side of this segment.
My thought is really simple. My thought is that when the LDS Church comes to the point that the money they're paying out on settlements and lawsuits for child sexual abuse like these cases, when that comes to the certain point that it's not worth it anymore, suddenly it will become mandatory for the bishop to have another adult in the room whenever he's interviewing youth. Bill, I can't quite hear you.
Anything on your mind with those, Rebecca?
Yeah, when I think about all of these stories that you mentioned, and there are even more along these lines in the news this week, there have been just a flood of these. What I think one of the common denominators, and when I think about my own growing up in the church, is kind of silence. The gentleman who was afraid to say anything after the washing and anointing, I think a lot of us can relate to that. Somebody who doesn't speak up when something unusual happens with the bishop. And even if it's not the worst, then the bishop is empowered to do that perhaps with somebody else. It's just this environment where you're not going to say anything and you're in this state of confusion. Was that supposed to be that way? Was my bishop supposed to tell me that? I mean, I know so many stories like this, including my own, where you just kind of don't say anything. You don't follow your gut. You don't trust your gut because it's your religion. There's secrecy. There are actual oaths, making you promise to keep things secret. And so exactly what you said, a spotlight, a floodlight on all of this. So whether or not these cases have merit, if they can go anywhere, the point is, like you said, Bill, articles are going to come out. They're going to dig deeper. What is the washing and anointing, right? Will this come out in court? Will there be articles about it? Anytime you can just put something into the open in sunshine and fresh air, the things that are not right are going to have to just scurry off into the darkness. And so I'm excited to see that. I think it's tragic when I saw how many stories like this there were in the news this week. So something needs to change.
And can I, excuse me, can I note with the washing and anointing, similar to the church changing its stance for no longer needing a 1-year wait between a civil marriage and a sealing. And I pointed out that I now realize that by that change, it was unnecessary for them to have offended my mom in her inability to go see me get married, for instance, and that I had to go get sealed. I had to go get this eternal marriage and put off whatever other marriage until to be sort of less important. In the same way, by the church having changed its washing and anointing to the point where no one any longer does that to you, they are self-admitting it was always unnecessary. Never, ever should adult people in roles of authority inside the temple, as a temple worker is seen as a person having authority to the 18, 19, 20-year-old kid going in to get their washing and anointing. Whatever inappropriate things have happened over the church's 100 and whatever years, 200 years of being in existence in that setting, the church's changes in recent years to do away with the washing and anointing occurring that way is a self-admittance that touching people under a shield, skin to skin, close to the private parts of their body was never necessary. And I think the church, on some level, should acknowledge that it was the one that created the unsafe spaces in which abuse occurred.
Very good. Continuing on then with an update from Fairview, throwing the ball to you, Rebecca.
Ooh, there it is. Did you want us to comment on the good side and the charitable aid before we go to my story?
Yeah, I would. Again, this is the hard thing to talk about, right? The church does
Right.
do good. It is minuscule compared to the amount of good they could do with the amount of money that they have. But I don't think it's 100% fair to completely take off the table that there are people who are positively affected by the limited amount of humanitarian aid that they give. And I wanted to highlight some instances where that happened. And so, yeah, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on the positive side as well.
I'm glad that they're doing it. I wish that they had done as much before the size of their investment account had been made known by the good people at the Widow's Mite report.
True.
Because then it would look more sincere, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say something similar. And I was going to draw your attention to another charitable act in Prosper, right next door to Fairview, where they had a sort of like a soup kitchen, kind of a place that dispensed food, and it burnt down. And the church, a member there knew of the situation, got a hold of the church, and the church drove a semi-truck down to the area. So goodwill, positive PR in Fairview, and also really helping the people. So it does work out. So, but I agree with you, RFM. We've seen such an uptick in charitable giving ever since the Widow's Mite, ever since the SEC. I mean, it is astronomical what has been happening. And I'm glad that we're all still tracking it. I still do wonder when I see these articles like what you showed, Bill, where it's like, here's some wheelchairs, here's some laptops. And then the same day in the paper, church purchases luxury apartment building for, 30 million. Do those numbers correlate at all? I tend to look at that. So I think they're doing better. I think they can continue to do better. That would be my take.
Very good.
Yep. All right. On to Fairview. Are we headed that direction since we just
We're
talked
there.
about Prosper? Okay. We have a little bit of an update from Fairview here. As we all know, I don't even think I need to rehearse what's happening there. But after mediation, the town council there said, yes, we'll accept your shorter temple. The residents, not so much. And mediation kind of disintegrated. And the LDS Church is intending to sue Fairview there. So there was a town council meeting. Nothing was on the agenda officially about the temple, but about 30 people in their Fairview United, that's FU, shirts showed up just to show their support for the town council and saying you do not need to back down on this. We can make sure that the church adheres to our zoning codes, adheres to our laws here, and builds a temple that will be good for them and also good for the city and good for the residents. Let me see here. That's the headline. So it says about 30 Fairview United residents and community members showed up at Tuesday's council meeting in the green shirts, encouraging this council not to back down at the church's threat to sue. Some shirts displayed the town slogan, "Keeping it country," and read, "Follow the law of the land, not an inch taller." Other t-shirts read, "Long live dark blue skies and butterflies," which is a nod to Fairview's laws protecting the town's dark skies. We haven't even begun to delve into dark skies and lighting of this temple. We are still just talking about the height, which is now at 120 feet via the mediation. Although now that's kind of yanked off, and I think we're back to 173 feet. It's really hard to tell. Fairview United fully supports a redesigned temple so long as the roof height does not exceed 42 inches and the steeple height does not exceed 68 inches. And Fairview's code of ordinances are followed. Read a statement presented to Fairview Council members Tuesday. It is Fairview United's sincere hope that this matter will be settled amicably and without further delay. And those dimensions represent the precedent for religious buildings in Fairview, of which the LDS Church still has the largest building in their stake center, which is 68 feet high. So it says currently, yeah, I just basically said that. It is the tallest building. They are not surprised, say the community members, when they heard that the church is intending to sue. "I was sad. I was disappointed. I definitely feel that the LDS Church is using their power and full weight of their financial reserves to really intimidate the town." In the public meeting, the town residents expressed a willingness to face the lawsuit from the church if it doesn't accept the zoning precedents. This is what's different about Fairview from any other town. All of the other towns that we follow in recent history, eventually the towns kind of have to say, look, we don't want to be sued. We can't afford a lawsuit, as they said in Vegas. We're just going to have to kind of give in. In this town, the town council has said, sure, we'll put this mediated temple in front of everybody, but it still has to go through the process, still has to go to planning and zoning, still has to go to town council. And the residents have said, you know, this doesn't meet our codes. We're okay, town council, if the town gets involved in this lawsuit. We are here to support you. That is very different from what other towns have said. So a resident, Ben Brown, called the church a gigantic Utah corporation, threatening Fairview. Last fall, the town created its zoning defense fund. The town has a fund and the residents have a fund. That's really interesting to, you know, raise capital to fight this lawsuit. So here's the interesting part. The town leaders react. Fairview Mayor Henry Lesner, emphasized that the town officials unanimously approved the 120-foot result of mediation. They did. They said, this is fine with us. We just have to put it through our own democratic process in our town. Sending it to public for discussion. He can't say whether the council members have changed their mind since the vote, but he hopes that the church will submit its plans, meaning new plans that meet its code. They might be surprised, Lesner said. Again, they might be surprised. The mayor said that he would have voted in favor of the dimensions agreed on in the non-binding mediation if the plans made it through the democratic process of the town's planning and zoning and then to the town council. He's frustrated that the church instead just outlined its plans to sue. It never submitted an official application. It never will know what would have happened in planning and zoning or the town council. Instead, it just said it was going to sue. They've been bullies, Lesner said. It's not us, it's them. The ball is in their court, town officials have said. There's nothing to approve because they didn't submit anything. This is why they're saying the ball is in your court. They have not submitted any official drawing to the town yet. So I don't know what would have happened, said Fairview Mayor Pro Tem John Hubbard, who was running for Lesner's seat in a year. I wish they would have submitted plans and started the process. We did everything we were supposed to do according to the non-binding agreement. And this is true. Mormonish did an episode on this. The town did do everything it was supposed to do. And then the town just kind of taking the temperature of the residents and not feeling maybe it was a slam dunk, decided to not follow through and did not submit anything. Mayor Lesner repeated Tuesday night that he does not see it as an issue against religion, but as a fight in defense of the town's identity. That's very important to make that clear. We are not persecuting, Lesner said. We have welcome arms if you want to build a temple in Fairview, but doggone it, make it where it fits into the neighborhood. I love Texas town council meetings. They're really spicy and they're really exciting. Because of the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and this is the act that their lawyer initially threatened all the residents with at the very first meeting that they ever had a chance to meet the residents and tell them who the LDS were. They used this act to threaten the town. Fairview will need to show it has a compelling reason why it will enforce zoning laws against the church if the town is sued, according to a professor here at Baylor University. So, this is religion and law, and there's a whole bunch of things tied up in this. For Fairview residents, the compelling reason to stick to their guns is the character of their town, protecting the small town feel, and not allowing taller buildings. This character defines Fairview, Lester said, a town of nearly 11,000 people around 30 miles north of Dallas. What the church is saying is not, what the church is saying is that's not very compelling. So the church is saying, your look and feel, that does not trump our religious freedom, or as my co-host Landon likes to say, religious privilege. There's a very fine line, but a huge difference. Both sides have some grounds. So nobody really knows how this might shake out. And again, they have not officially sued the town. They have just put forward an intent to sue. Let's see, I think I have one more slide on this. Little update here. Yeah. So it says the temple's original design still would have been the town's largest building. Its redesign of 120 foot would still be the town's largest building. There's nothing that tall in this town, says some of the residents. I can't imagine seeing that every single day. If people are right in the shadow of the temple, what would happen to the value of their house? Well, of course, the church assures everybody that the value will go up. Again, to remind everyone, that's only if you're going to sell. The value may go up, but that means your property taxes go up. And we have heard instances in other towns where elderly people have had to sell because they cannot afford the property taxes. So if you intend to live there forever in the shadow of the temple, you'll just see your taxes rise. Let's see. I think this is our last one.
Well, the rising taxes also direct our vision toward God, just like the temple spire. See?
Yes, anything that rises. You're absolutely right. I hadn't really thought of that, RFM. That's a really good point. So denying a permit for the McKinney, Texas temple imposes a substantial burden on the church's religious exercise by not allowing it to construct a house of worship that meets its needs. This is what the church says. And again, we proved over and over that you can do everything you need to do inside a temple without a spire, without a steeple. There are many temples that fit that criteria. So it's an interesting argument. The church has stated that McKinney, Texas temple will accommodate a growing congregation in North Texas. Again, that's kind of up for debate. There's a pretty strong religious liberty argument. This is really the exercise of religion here. So that's really what it is. The church also cites, again, Arlupa, a word none of us knew probably 6 months ago, and now everybody knows that word, knows exactly what it means. The Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Person Act. If they do go to court, perceived or real bias against the church and its members will not help the town's argument in defense of its character. The language that characterizes the church as a bully or a Goliath, intimidating David, really hurts Fairview's case, some legal analysts think. So, and we've always said this, the church is so used to being the David in the David and Goliath story that to find themselves being a Goliath and everybody seeing them being a Goliath, I don't think they really know what to do. So a lot of people weighing in. It's getting more and more attention as this suit could become a reality and perhaps go to the highest courts in the land. We don't know. And speaking of higher courts, I will update everybody really quickly on Cody, Wyoming. I mentioned this before. The residents' lawsuit, the Preserve Our Cody neighborhood, is going to the Wyoming Supreme Court on February 11th. So that's tomorrow. And it will be live streamed. I'll put links to that on all of our different platforms if anybody wants to check that out. But basically, the residents are suing their own town, who is being supported by the LDS Church, and saying there was a lot of questionable things that happened behind the scenes in that temple being passed. So it should be pretty interesting. And we'll update you next week, of course, on the newscast as to what happens. But that's at 2:30, whatever Cody, Wyoming time is, on Tuesday tomorrow. I think that's all I have on Fairview. Any thoughts or comments before we move forward?
Bill?
I think it's all been said. I think it's just a matter of sort of waiting it out. I mean, we definitely want to cover updates like this, but in terms of, I think we've all laid out what it all means.
Yep.
We have to wait at this point.
I agree.
Can I go back a couple slides here?
Sure.
Yeah. See, it's not butterflies, it's fireflies.
Oh.
See the lady shirt?
Yeah, I was going to say butterflies typically aren't out at night and you can't really see them, but it's fireflies. That makes a lot more sense.
Who's the
Well,
reporter
only
who
you
got
would
this
notice
wrong?
this. Only
Maybe
you
it's a
would
different
notice
shirt.
this.
I don't know. Maybe they
Like,
got all kinds of
seriously.
shit. I don't know why butterflies
Who
would be in
notices
jeopardy of the
these things?
temple, but fireflies I can understand. Okay.
Yep,
So having said all of that, which wasn't very much, but I think it's important to get the details straight.
it is.
A statement. See, third paragraph. I think this is the most important thing to me in this article. A statement was presented to the Fairview Council members on Tuesday from Fairview United. Now they're just saying they fully support a temple so long as it's this short, not actually the agreed upon amount, right? The part
Yeah,
that
it can
was
be up to
mediated.
120 feet. Right. And they're saying that mediation, okay, great. You came down a little bit, still way beyond what the codes of our town call for.
Yeah, they don't understand what a CUP is for. However, here's what just occurred to me, okay? Because at the end of your story, I was thinking about what this is going to look like on appeal, because I had already said that it's not going to look so good for the town, that the church is busy jockeying for position. They don't want to submit this modified plan, because if the town then votes against it, that's what they're worried about. If the church trusted the town at this point to do what they've agreed to do, then all of this wouldn't be happening, except that the mayor went shooting his mouth off and giving indications that maybe he wasn't as committed to following through on this plan, the modified plan, as he had said or signed off on. So I think that the church is thinking that they want to appeal on the full deal. All right. So they don't want to submit the smaller temple that they had
Correct.
agreed to.
Yep.
On the other hand, one of the things that makes this an interesting case is that cuts both ways, because part of the record will be this non-binding mediation agreement. And so the church is in the position now, if they appeal here, and I think this is all just jockeying for position to get everybody's attention and make sure that we all go through this the way it's agreed. I think that's what's going to happen. Okay, I still do. But I think that if the church is going to appeal now, then part of the record is that they agreed to submit the smaller temple, and then they refused to. So the problem is, if the church agreed to a smaller temple, how can they say that they have to have the big temple, otherwise their religious rights are being infringed?
That is a brilliant argument. I had not thought of that. Yeah, you're exactly right. That is
Yeah, I'd sure
fascinating.
be arguing that from the city side
Yeah.
if I were
But let me
representing
just
them.
say one thing, because I have noticed in the comments, people are misunderstanding the town council. And I think maybe you guys do a little bit too. They said, yes, we will vote yes for an 120-foot temple. We will completely vote yes. Then after that, some of the town people were pretty vocal. Fairview United was pretty vocal. And the town council said to the church, I can't speak for my residents and how that will go. I can't speak for the democratic process. I can't speak for the planning commission. We will vote for it, but I can't tell you what the process of putting it through, what has to happen in our town. I can't tell you how that will end. So, in my opinion, kind of, and we did do a podcast on that, they were trying to help the church by saying, look, I don't know, we would vote for it, but I don't know what the citizens think. I don't know what the democratic process is going to yield.
Well, the democratic process from the church's point of view is supposed to yield what we agreed to.
Exactly. And the town was saying the town council was saying to the church, we can't deliver the vote, right? In a
Yes,
theocracy,
they
you
can.
can.
These
They
people
can,
are not voting. The
Yeah.
citizens are not voting.
The planning and
Members of the
zoning
city
is, though.
council are voting.
The planning and zoning is,
And the
and
planning
if
and
it
zoning
does,
commission, I understand, do what the city tells them to do, right? They control their votes.
no, and if it recommends no on the shorter temple, then it takes a super majority of the town council when it goes to town council. And so they can't necessarily promise they'll deliver it. So I don't know.
Well, anyway, we'll have to see
We'll
what
see.
happens here. I
Yeah.
still think this is going to have a wonderful ending. Everybody's going to be holding hands around the temple, like is it at the end of The Grinch That Stole Christmas, and they're all singing that song,
Yeah.
that words I can never understand.
Yeah, and they're all, wonderful.
I knew you
love
would know that. Thank you. All right, let's see what's going on next here. Look, it's me. New civil CSA. This is the time to duck out if this is triggering. CSA stands for child sexual abuse. New civil CSA lawsuit filed against LDS Church and a former mission president / Area 70. This was filed last Friday, February 3rd, 2025. And I had found links elsewhere where I was able to find a link to the PACER system. And the PACER is a subscription whereby you can access different court documents. I don't have a subscription. Fortunately, I know someone who does. So I sent this down to that person who is a lawyer in Salt Lake City, would rather remain anonymous, but he's been a help to me in the past and was again here. So he accessed the complaint, all these documents. Really, it's only the complaint that we're interested in. It's actually a first amended complaint. And there that is. Oh, I just remembered something. Is that I'm going to have to, let me do this right now, okay? By the way, Bill or Rebecca, have you heard anything about this case?
Yes.
Really? Tell us about it.
No, I think it's your case to talk about. It was interesting because it had a lot of, initials in it, like so-and-so, protected so-and-so, and allowed so-and-so. So RFM is the one that sorted it all out for us. And I think you're going to go into that, aren't you? Because the rest of us were like, it just didn't make much sense. But it was basically about a mission president who seemed to have knowledge of, a sexual abuser and seemed to put him back in situations where things could possibly happen again. So it was of concern.
Yes, it was. And thank you very, very much. Because what I was doing was, of course, I was accessing this entire complaint. This is a screenshot of the complaint. Okay, this is just a slide of the complaint. So let me see here. We can end up doing this right.
Yeah, there were a lot of moving parts to this, but it was very interesting.
So here's what, thank you so much for covering for me. I appreciate the tap dance. This is filed in the United States District Court, Western District of Washington, your old stomping grounds, Rebecca.
That's right.
Now, the title of it is HB. That's for a child. That's for a minor, okay? HB are the initials. By and through his guardian ad litem, Brandon Bussey, Bussey. And it's versus the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Payden, Paydan, Bussey. You'll notice a similar last name. Thane Lyman, Philip Bussey, Kathy Bussey, and Does 1 through 20. Why so many Busseys? Because they're all in the same family, and also because they're quite closely related, as it turns out. And thank you, Rebecca. I have been doing a lot of research on this to try and figure out how does this relate to each other and what exactly happened. We should be able to figure this out by the end of this story. So Philip Bussey is the mission president. That's the MP, okay? Philip Bussey, right? See, his name is down there among the defendants. Philip Bussey and Kathy Bussey is his wife. Philip Bussey and Kathy Bussey. Got it? They have several children. The two that are relevant to this lawsuit are Payden Bussey and Brandon Bussey. Brandon is the older. Payden is the youngest. Somewhat, by some degree, actually. And you'll see that here by the ages here in a minute. Because Philip Bussey and Kathy Bussey. Oh, let me go ahead and let's introduce you to the people. I got this information and these pictures from the blog site or website for the Spain Madrid mission president, 2018 to 2021. It's their blog site when they were the mission presidents, or he was the mission president for 3 years. President and Sister Bussey mission blog. You can still find it. At least I found it this morning. Lots of pictures there. And there's Philip Bussey and his wife, Kathy Bussey. They were, as mentioned, mission president and sister, or his wife. Honestly, I don't know what they call them nowadays. They used to just call it the mission president and his wife, right? But they do something different nowadays. I'm not sure what it is. They try and indicate that the wife has some kind of leadership role, whether she does or not. All right, so we are the Busseys, it says. Phil and Kathy, and we are currently blessed to live in, see, this is from between 2018 to 2021 when this was true. We are currently blessed to live in and preside over the Madrid, Spain mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We didn't apply for or pursue this opportunity. Although you would probably understand when we say we've been preparing for it our entire lives. Okay, so that's Philip Bussey and Kathy Bussey. Now, the oldest son, at least that we're dealing with here, is Brandon Bussey. He is married to Heidi, and they have children, but the one that's at issue here is HB. Remember, those are the initials. He's the one who's bringing the lawsuit, or at least Brandon Bussey is bringing the lawsuit on behalf of his son, HB. Now look back here. See HB buying through his guardian ad litem, Brandon Bussey. That's the dad. Okay. So there's Brandon and his wife, Heidi. Here's some children. And I took care of their faces for obvious reasons and their names below. But initials A and H on the children. So we've introduced you to Philip, Kathy, Brandon, Heidi, and HB. That parentheses victim, that stands for alleged victim. That's who the victim is, allegedly. And Peyton Bussey is the defendant. So Peyton Bussey is the youngest child of Phil and Kathy. And there's a picture of Peyton. This is from the Mission blog where he's swimming there. That's his mom and the dog Copper. This is another picture of Peyton, which was on the Floodlit webpage, which had a synopsis of this story. But the synopsis itself, because it's kind of complicated, all the relationships and everything, that was complicated too, because it's just a synopsis. Fortunately, I was able to get the document so I could flesh it out a bit, understand better what's going on. So here's the first amended complaint, which I'm going to go to here. Hang on just a second. I got to check this out. Okay. All right. First amended complaint. And now you can see all these people, right, that now we've met and we know how they relate to each other. There's HB buying through his guardian ad litem and his dad, Brandon Bussey, against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Peyton Bussey, who's the guy who is alleged to have actually done the molestation. Thane Lyman, different last name. He's a bishop who interviewed Peyton Bussey for his priesthood ordination. That's why he has a different last name. But Philip Bussey and Kathy Bussey, we've met them, and now we know why they all have the same last name except for Thane Lyman. And Doe's 1 through 100 inclusive. In other words, there's places where additional defendants could be added as discovery sorts it out and may end up indicating other people were involved. It's an 11-count complaint. You can see there on the right, there's a jury demand. Now, here's the introduction, and I've already done the introduction for you. What I want to do is I want to get down here to jurisdiction and venue. It talks about why this court has jurisdiction and venue. It is a federal court. The parties, we've met the parties. And now, by the way, here's something I wanted to highlight before we get to the detailed account. Upon information reported publicly in the media, LDS Church owns financial assets and real estate in excess of $200 billion. That's from the Widow's Mite. So I just wanted to make that comment. If it weren't for the Widow's Mite, we wouldn't have any idea. Statute of limitations, no problem with that. Okay, factual allegations, which are common to all 11 causes of action. Here we go. And by the way, just go ahead and say anything if you have any questions, okay? Rebecca, Bill?
You're doing a great job of cutting through it.
Thank you. So defendant Peyton Bussey, it says Bussey or perpetrator, had a history of sexual abuse before abusing HB or plaintiff. So HB is Peyton's nephew, right? In 2010, Philip Bussey, mission president, was called to be a part of the Area 70. Prior to 2010, Philip had been serving as president of the Bellevue, Washington stake. Prior to that, Philip had been a bishop in the Duthie Hall Ward and stake mission president. In 2012, while living in the Seattle area of Washington, Bussey, whenever it says Bussey by itself, that's referring to Payton. Payton Bussey was investigated by police for allegations of sexual abuse relating to an incident at a swim meet. He was later charged and convicted. As a result of his conviction, Bussey was required to go to therapy, put on probation, and required to register as a sex offender. Now, in the Floodlit article, it states that Payton was born in 1998, which would have made him 14 or so in 2012. So he's 14 years old. He's a juvenile. We don't get details about what happens at the swim meet, but apparently there's an allegation, and I expect it's because they have the paperwork that there was a conviction and that he was required to go to therapy, be put on probation, and required to register as a sex offender. In other words, what he got was a SOSA, a special sex offender sentencing alternative. It doesn't say that, but that's what it was. In late 2014, so 2 years later now, when living in Washington, Bussey, Payton, molested then infant HB. So he's an infant HB is at this point. And something that's not exactly clear, and I don't know the answer to, is how this was reported, how this was disclosed. Obviously, an infant can't disclose it. So, which leaves you with two options. Either somebody saw it, which it doesn't say, or Payton Bussey admitted it later, which is probably the more likely, and why nobody knew anything about it at the time, apparently. In late 2014 or early 2015, Kathy Bussey, that's Kathy, and Philip, husband and wife, informed HB's father. So at this point, they know, okay? Something happens to where Philip and Kathy find out about this molestation. Either they see it or Payton tells them, I guess. I don't know of any other way. But then they inform HB's father, who is Brandon, remember, that Payton Bussey had inappropriately touched HB, but did not provide more information and indicated that it was a one-time mistake Bussey made while going through a phase of confusion. Think about this for a second, okay? Brandon Bussey is the son of Philip and Kathy, and it's his son who's the alleged victim here. He's bringing this lawsuit himself. I mean, he's the son of an Area 70, he's the son of a mission president. And now Phil Bussey is a state patriarch. I don't know what his beliefs are at this point, but Brandon Bussey is bringing a lawsuit on behalf of his son against not only the LDS Church, but against his dad and his mom, and against his brother. So in late 2014 or early 2015, when Kathy and Phil tell HB's father, Brandon, about this, they give it just this very slanted description. And there's nothing here that indicates to me whether Brandon knew about the incident at the swim meet 2 years earlier in 2012. During the period when Bussey, once again, this is Payton, during the period when Payton Bussey first abused HB as an infant, the abuse took place in Philip and Kathy's home in Bothell, Washington. During this time, HB was left in Philip and Kathy's care. Philip and Kathy then left HB unsupervised with Bussey in their home, despite knowing of his history of sexually abusing minors. Now, that can only refer to the swim meet. While still on probation in Washington, Kathy and Philip sent Payton Bussey to a residential treatment program in Utah that was staffed by members of the LDS Church. Bussey also began attending school in Utah. As a result of his moving to attend school, while still under the registration requirement for his Washington conviction, Bussey was also required to register as a sex offender in Utah. So this has been talked about in some places where they talk about him being a registered sex offender in Washington as well as in Utah. And I figured out before I read this that most likely it's not because he has two separate crimes in each state, but because he moved from one state to another and had to register in the other state because he was still on probation. He's still required to register, and that ended up being the case. In January 2015, while he was still a registered sex offender in both Washington and Utah, Peyton Bussey met with Bishop Thane Lyman, okay, to become ordained into the priesthood. I don't know what priesthood, but this is 2015. If Peyton were born 1998, as stated on Floodlit, then he's 17 now. So you would think that it might be the Melchizedek priesthood. I don't know. Maybe it's to become a priest. I don't know, but it's to get the priesthood. Now it has this statement here. In order to become ordained, Bussey would have had to confess his history of sexually abusing minors to Lyman, the bishop. I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but I guess they'll find out once they get to depose Lyman. Because I imagine a lot of guys have been ordained to the priesthood in the LDS Church without confessing their entire history. That might have prevented them otherwise. So would have had to, I would have put, should have confessed his history of sexual abusing minors to Lyman. Yeah, he should have. Paragraph 40, during this time when Peyton Bussey was on probation, Philip was a member of the 70 in the LDS Church, and I think that's the Area 70. The 70 are the layer between the local LDS Church administration and the general LDS Church administration. Kathy and Philip had been in communication. This is important. Kathy and Philip had been in communication with senior leadership in the LDS Church and members of the first or second quorum of the 70. What about? Well, Kathy and Philip had consulted with these leaders in the LDS Church about Peyton Bussey's conduct, as well as his criminal case and how to proceed. So it's an interesting situation, and I have a slide on it later. But obviously, whoever it is they're talking to knows about what's going on with Peyton and didn't take any steps to intercede or protect HB. But in a very real way, Philip himself and Kathy are not only defendants, they're also representatives of the LDS Church, especially a mission president, area authority. They're a representative of the LDS Church. So not only is he someone who should have known better, he's also someone whose lack of knowing better and doing better to protect his own grandchild can be attributed to the church. If Philip Bussey is acting in the capacity of a mission president or area authority or patriarch, he's a stake patriarch now. That'll come up later when he's doing this. All right. In fact, Bussey's criminal conviction, probation, and registration requirements were active barriers to Philip pursuing his calling of mission president in Spain. Philip was not able to go to Madrid to fulfill his calling as mission president until Bussey's criminal case and his requirements were all resolved. Now, if anybody in the comments or the live chat, or Rebecca or Bill, would weigh in on this, because this is news to me. I'm not sure why I would know about it before, but I tried to look up some stuff about requirements for mission presidents, right? And what I came up with was the Mission President's Handbook. This is one that had been leaked by Mormon Leaks, I believe it was, a few years back. And the only thing I could find, and this is a few years old, it's not an updated version, has to do with your children, right? Directed to the mission president. Mission presidents' children normally are not set apart as missionaries and are not subject to the rules of conduct and dress that apply to full-time missionaries. They should, however, live exemplary lives, dress and groom modestly, and act appropriately. I guess I could cover a lot of ground. It's not very specific here. Hey, Bill, Rebecca, have you ever heard of anything like this?
Yeah,
About a
how
mission
old was
president
he at
not
that
able to
time?
serve as a mission president because of a child?
Mhm. Yeah, how old was he at the Bussey? How old was he at this time?
Okay, well, they were starting with this, I think it was in 2016.
Okay, so he would have
So
been
18.
just 18. Yeah, or maybe even under 18.
17
And yeah,
or 18.
there's definitely this idea that you have to have everything in order. If there's something like a court case that would call you back, and I'm guessing if he was a minor, the parents would have to go with him. There might be something like that. Maybe even at 18, you're considered somebody that needs parental supervision in this case. I don't know. But if there's any loose ends, basically, with your family or your kid, you can't go to another country to serve. You have to have everything tied up in a bow. Everything has to be great so that nothing will call you back or distract you. So that's the only thing I can think.
Maybe Bill?
Sorry. The Mission President Handbook is not something I've spent a lot of time reading. I know of a few sections with the things they can spend. I'm not much aware outside of that, and I don't know anything beyond what Rebecca.
Okay, well, I'll keep going then with this complaint. After the 2 years of Bussey, once again, that's Payden. After the 2 years of Payden's registration requirement had passed, and per Washington's legislation for minor offenders, Bussey was eligible for his registration requirement to be removed and for his case to be sealed. Philip and Kathy hired an attorney, who helped petition to get Bussey removed from the Washington Sex Offender Registry list and to get his case sealed. Yeah, because the law allows for it. I did a show about that in a different case. Once they had succeeded in doing so in late 2017, so that's late 2017, Philip and Kathy then worked tirelessly to get Bussey removed from the Utah Sex Offender Registry and were successfully able to get him removed shortly after. I'm not sure about the tirelessly part, but at least they got him removed shortly after. You would think that since being on the Utah registry is because he was on the Washington registry, that getting him off the Washington registry would make it pretty easy to get him off the Utah registry. Upon information and belief, that's when you don't have any evidence of something, but you think it's true, and you're planning on hopefully finding it and proving it later. Upon information and belief, the LDS Church failed to investigate or excommunicate Payden Bussey in relation to the allegations of sexual abuse brought to them by Kathy and Philip, and the criminal charges against him for abusing plaintiff and his other victims. This could be significant. Okay. It's almost certainly the case that Payden Bussey was never excommunicated. And why not? And if he had been, would that have been likely to prevent HB from being sexually abused? The LDS Church was on notice of Bussey's previous predatory behavior and still allowed Payden Bussey to play with and be around other children unsupervised. Payden Bussey also continued to reside with Kathy and Philip in their home. He's still a young kid. That's understandable. But Philip is a stake patriarch. So in the home, they continue to open their home to members of the LDS Church, including young children who are coming to receive blessings from Philip and his leadership role in the LDS Church. And I'm wondering about the characterization of young children there, because this is in terms of a stake patriarch. It's really neither here nor there, because they're not alleging that any of these kids who came over for a patriarchal blessing, they're just trying to show, well, they're still being negligent here. Is it over 12 that you have to be to get a patriarchal blessing? I didn't get one until I was like 19, but then I didn't join until I was 18.
I don't know why I'm thinking 14, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
It could be 11 because now you can be ordained, you can move up in young women. So I think in the comments, Landon had an interesting point where he said they get free tuition if they're kid, a mission president's child. Could he possibly have been at BYU? Wouldn't that be interesting? I don't know. Somebody
I
look
expect
at
that's
that.
where he was going to school.
That's what I'm
Oh,
saying.
I'm sorry, because that will come up later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll continue then. So I was just wondering about how that was being characterized. But once again, I say it's neither really here nor there. 44. Now, this is a typo, I'm sure, but it's kind of funny in a Mormon context. In early 2018, Philip was called to be a mission president. So shortly after they got the case taken care of, it's sealed, it's basically expunged, and Payden doesn't have to register as a sex offender anymore. Then, early 2018, Philip was called to be a mission president along with this wife, Kathy, as opposed to his other wives. I think that the T is not supposed to be there. I think it's supposed to be along with his wife, Kathy, in Madrid. Prior to being called into this role, Kathy had been a Ward Relief Society president.
Could I just
in,
note
in Madrid? Yes, sir. What?
Yeah. So how old? This was as of 2004. There is no set age. You should be old enough to appreciate the sacred nature of the blessing. So as of 2004, and folks can correct us if that's not right, but as of 2004, there was no required age.
Thank you very much. Oh, let's see. Yeah, thanks. Let me go back to this. When in Madrid, Philip and Kathy were staying at a home that was owned by the LDS Church, which was a mission home. Yeah, it's the mission home, where Philip and Kathy were residing as part of their leadership roles within the LDS Church. Missionaries were often in and out of the home, and Philip and Kathy used the property as a way to further the goal and mission of the LDS Church. In December 2019, they got there in July, or at least they started their mission in July of 2018. Then they went through training, then got shipped out to Spain. But in December of 2019, the following year, Philip and Kathy invited HB, his family, and Peyton Bussey to visit their home in Madrid, the mission home, to see their mission work and spend Christmas and New Year's with them. All the tickets were purchased and paid for by the LDS Church. You bet they were, because mission president, right, Bill?
Yep.
While in Madrid, Peyton Bussey began grooming HB for further sexual abuse and sexually abusing him. It's a confusing sentence. I would have written it, while in Madrid, Bussey began sexually abusing him, HB, and began grooming him for further sexual abuse, because more is going to happen. Warning. Bussey began to touch HB inappropriately, fondling him over his clothes. After the sexual abuse took place in Madrid, Bussey then began texting HB individually, teaching him how to delete his text messages so that HB's parents did not learn of the grooming behavior and abuse. I think HB was born around 2014, so he would have been around 5 here, I think. In 2020, while Bussey was attending school in Utah, so yeah, probably BYU, he would often come and visit HB and his family. This is his brother, right? Brother's wife, the kids. HB's one of them. And his family at their home in Utah. Perpetrator, once again, now they changed to this. It's Bussey. Bussey would come stay for the weekend, and Philip and Kathy sometimes coordinated these stays, despite their knowledge of his history of sexually abusing young children, including plaintiff. There, I think they're talking about including plaintiff as the infant. I'm not sure that there's anything in here that says they know about what happened in Madrid yet. When he came to visit, perpetrator Bussey, Peyton, would often get gifts and trinkets for both HB and his sister. In order to throw off suspicion of his gifts to plaintiff, Bussey would also purchase sheets and blankets for the purpose of creating blanket forts to play with HB. Rebecca, can I ask you this question? How does purchasing sheets and blankets for creating a blanket fort throw off suspicion of his gifts? Is the idea here that he's giving the gifts under cover of the blanket fort, and so people don't know about it? Do you know what that means? Do you
Yeah,
understand
I can't understand that. I had all boys. If an older person came over, a teenager, and said, "Hey, I brought your kids some sheets and blankets, and we're just going to make this fort," I definitely would go, "Okay, that's an unusual gift. That's kind of strange." Maybe he was bringing those to the parents, to the household, but either way, I don't understand what that means. There must be something more to it that isn't clear there.
Any insight, Bill?
Nope, I can't make sense of that either.
Okay. Anytime you can't make sense of something, it would be a good thing to revisit and maybe try and redo. But this is what we have. And this is the first amended complaint. So this is already with some corrections. All of these items were paid for by Philip and Kathy via the LDS Church, as Bussey did not have a steady source of income. During his visits from 2020 through summer of 2020, early 2020 through summer of 2020, Bussey would sexually abuse HB. The sexual abuse escalated from fondling over the clothes to fondling HB when he was naked and making HB fondle him when he was naked. Peyton. The sexual abuse continued to escalate until Peyton Bussey began to coerce HB into orally copulating him and performing oral copulation on plaintiff. The oral copulation oftentimes took place in the blanket forts that Peyton Bussey would make with plaintiff, using sheets and items he had purchased for the purpose of creating the forts. In May 2023, okay, this is when everything comes crashing down. In May 2023, Bussey, perpetrator, sexually abused HB when he was 8 years old. While staying at HB's home, Bussey required HB to perform oral copulation on him before Bussey then performed oral copulation on HB. Peyton Bussey took photos of these interactions and told HB that he was going to send them to a friend. During one of these instances, Bussey had restrained and pinned down HB while they were in a blanket fort. As a result of the sexual abuse, Bussey is facing criminal charges in Utah, 3 counts of sodomy on a child, 1 count of kidnapping of a child, and sexual abuse of a child. So something happens here where it gets disclosed. It gets reported to police, and Peyton Bussey gets charged again, now in Utah, with these criminal counts involving HB as opposed to a swim meet. LDS Church hid Bussey's predatory behavior and history in order to seek favor with his family, which is an interesting way of looking at it, because it's saying they're seeking favor. The church is seeking favor with Bussey's parents because they want to get all this free work out of him being mission president. Certainly one way to look at it. At the time Bussey was first charged with child sexual abuse, Philip was a member of the 70, which holds a high level of authority within the LDS Church. When Bussey, the perpetrator, sexually abused plaintiff in summer of 2023, Philip had been elevated. I highlighted that because I'm not sure it's an elevation, but whatever, to the position of stake patriarch within LDS Church. So, you know, it's like these little things where you see an earmark of an attorney who's not a Mormon, who doesn't understand this very complicated government that the church has. The repeated incidents of sexual abuse and continued exposure to his abuser caused plaintiff pain and suffering, both physically as a result of the assaults and molestation, as well as psychologically. And it goes on through a bunch of other things here, and I think I've already probably taken enough time. Here's something I did note. Mainly because those are all the facts. In not excommunicating Bussey upon the first allegation and suspicion of abuse, the LDS Church had placed plaintiff and other young boys in the LDS Church community at risk of harm from Bussey. I thought that was a powerful sentence. Because the question is, did they ever excommunicate Peyton Bussey for any of this? If not, why not? And if not, did that lead toward the abuse or further abuse of HB? And I'm going to leave it at that for right now. And I'm going to come back to you and ask you for your thoughts.
I just think it's incredibly sad how many of these stories we're reporting on. They're just so prevalent.
It's amazing. We're actually not reporting on all of them. There are others that are coming out. And I've got another one that's concluding, which I have a couple of slides on, where there's finally a plea of guilty and sentencing. And this one's just starting now.
Yeah, just the same thing. You have these situations, right? You've got a mission president in his home. You've got his kids. You've got, anyway, you would think, even if this church wasn't true, and if it was only good, it would find it important to create protocols and processes by which children specifically, but all people generally, would be safe at least as safe as you could ensure. And that's the trouble. People within Mormonism and its context, people are not as safe as they could possibly be with just some common sense changes to the rules and the processes by which the thing operates.
Well, those were the main things that I had figured out factually. There were a couple of others that came up later on in the causes of action. Under the 10th cause of action, sexual assault of a minor, it had at least a nice summary of the facts there. 2014, by the way, they don't have 2012. 2012 is a swim meet. 2014, Bussey sexually abused and assaulted HB, who was 6 months old at the time. In 2019, Bussey sexually abused and assaulted plaintiff while they were in Madrid. In 2020, Bussey further sexually assaulted and abused the plaintiff. And in 2023, Bussey again sexually assaulted and abused the plaintiff. I put that in there because it's easy to lose track of how often this was going on. It was a lot, and it should have been stopped, I think. Here is another thing that I had a question about that wasn't answered in the main facts, but is answered in paragraph 169. Actually, this is new information. I'm sorry. The next slide will be that. But the allegation by Brandon, who once again is bringing this lawsuit on behalf of his son, HB, says that his mom and his dad and others proceeded to use their positions of authority within the LDS Church to coerce plaintiff's father into allowing Bussey into his home. So there's no other facts saying what this coercion is. But what the straightforward reading of this is that Brandon, the father, is saying that his parents coerced Brandon into allowing Payton into their home where the molestation occurred, or at least some of it occurred. Yeah.
I can see that. I can see how parents would say, oh, we're a forever family. He's your brother. Just let him come over. He needs to spend some time with family. Just let him come over. You know, there's just this naivete or whatever it is, or just rose-colored glasses that you want it all to be okay, and you just don't face it. And I can totally see parents saying that. He needs your support right now. You know, he needs help. Let him come over. Let him hang out with the kids.
And more
I
than
can see that.
Go ahead, Bill.
And more than that, it looks like the father, the mission president, used some sort of statement that articulated that because he's a mission president, look, I'm busy doing mission president things. Mm-hmm. If you could just keep an eye on him while I'm, because the way that's worded, he proceeded to use their positions of authority within the LDS Church. Just prior to the highlighted part there on that slide you just had up there a second ago.
No, I was looking because under paragraph 162, see, 161 says 2019. That's the sexual abuse in Madrid. 2020, they're still mission presidents. They're still in Madrid. But Bussey's further sexually assaulting and abusing, the allegation is HB in Utah. So maybe that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
they're still in Spain. They can't get out of Spain. They're doing the mission thing.
Right. You're the head of the household, Brandon. You need to take care of your brother, you know, that kind of thing while we're gone.
Okay. I think that might be it. Now, here is something else, which is, did the bishop ever ordain Bussey? He did, according to this. Further on in the complaint. Furthermore, when Bussey himself did report his history of abuse within the LDS Church to Bishop Lyman. So they're saying that Payton did report his history of abuse to the bishop as part of being ordained, that the bishop did nothing and proceeded to use his authority within the LDS Church to ordain Payton Bussey regardless. And that's repeated in the next paragraph where they say anyways. Okay. So apparently, now you were shaking your head, Bill. Was that in disbelief?
Just that there's also a pattern in these stories over time, and not necessarily every one, but there's a pattern in these stories over time that this idea that, you know, we forgive and there's grace and repentance. It's like Mormon leaders are continually fooled into putting victims and abusers back in the same spaces again, which is also ridiculous. I
like to call that the "we love you, Brother Bundy" effect. where a ward embraces Ted Bundy, even though there are things that are already questionable before everything came out. And when he's in prison, they make a giant card. You can look it up online that says, "We'd let, Brother Bundy," and they all sign it. They just don't see it. They won't see it.
Mm-hmm. Because it's too ugly to see.
Yes.
We will not allow ourselves to see it. And that's that naivete you were talking about. So I mentioned, this is the slide I referred to earlier. As 70/mission president/stake patriarch, Philip Bussey is an agent of the LDS Church. So when they're suing the LDS Church, they're also suing based upon things he did when he was acting within his capacities as those callings within the LDS Church. This is a comment I saw over at Discuss Mormonism, that wonderful message board. And this is Physics Guy. And I wanted to put it up here and read it. There's a lot of good things said, but he really knocked it out of the park with this one, I think. Here's what Physics Guy says about this. I don't know how treatable pedophilia is by any means of any kind. People with pedophilia can certainly control themselves to avoid doing harm, if necessary, by avoiding all contact with children. But I don't know how much the condition itself can be changed. And I don't actually know how often it is that religious people of any kind persuade themselves or others that some spiritual power can cure pedophilia, like repentance, the atonement. Some people must really want to believe that God or whatever can and does cure it, however. Family and friends of pedophiles must want that. And I expect that many pedophiles themselves would much rather not be that way. For whatever reason, though, non-existence, lack of power, higher priorities beyond human conception, I think that's talking about God's non-existence. I don't think that God actually removes the condition very often. Expecting God to fix pedophilia seems to be like relying on prayer to cure cancer. Having set the stage, he concludes, prayer itself can hardly do direct harm, but relying on prayer to the point of not doing other things that could really help can do great harm. It's one thing to hope for a miracle when a miracle would be the only possible help. But it's another thing to make the miracle necessary by not doing all that you can. In Christian tradition, jumping off the temple so that angels will catch you is the advice of the devil. If you are the true church of God, then put this suspected pedophile in a high place, for surely God will not let him fall. That's also the devil's advice. Churches now have taken it. And that's all I have to say about that story for now. Do you have any comments about this comment, either Bill or Rebecca? I was going to end by saying the church and other defendants have 21 days in which to file their answer. It's filed February 3rd. That means they're due by Monday, February 24th, 2025.
Only that a church led by prophets, seers, and revelators who can see around corners should in 2025 have recognized that they're not doing enough and have done more. And we're going to have more of them in this year, right? We're already here. We're already in January. We've already named 4 cases or something that have come out. It's going to be a long year.
It is. Here's the one that's closing. As a new case begins, another case concludes. It's an eternal round. Utah, this is from this morning. This morning, February 10th, 2025. Jessica Schreifel, Salt Lake Tribune. Utah ex-therapist Scott Owens pleads guilty to sexually abusing 2 patients during sessions. Owen, 66, pleaded guilty to 3 charges of first-degree felony forcible sodomy, admitting that he sexually abused 2 male patients using his position as a therapist and led them to believe that sexual contact was part of their therapy. He also pleaded no contest on Monday, today, to another first-degree felony, attempted aggravated sexual abuse of a child, in connection with a third patient, a woman who alleged Owen touched her inappropriately during therapy sessions in 2007 when she was 13 years old. A no contest plea means that Owen did not admit he committed the crime, this one crime. The other three, he straight up pleaded guilty to, but conceded that prosecutors would present evidence at trial that would likely lead a jury to convict him. Owens faces a maximum sentence of up to life in prison during a sentencing hearing scheduled for March 31st. And there's more to say about it. I don't know that we really need to say more about it. But as I say, this is one that's ending. All that's left is the sentencing. And we've got another one starting with that other case we talked about with Peyton Bussey, both criminally and civilly. I think we've got another story now. Is this one? This is you, Rebecca, isn't it? This is much more lighthearted.
Yes, we're going to end with a little more. Did you want to touch at all on that other case out of BYU, or will we save that for next week?
I don't want to. There's so much that's going on.
And
part of the problem is like all the tithing lawsuits. It's hard to keep track of them.
It is.
It becomes, when you get too many, it can be overwhelming to me. And I know there's a lot out there, but it also makes it so it's harder for me to keep track of the specifics. And it's the specifics where the real case is. So I'd rather just focus on a few with the specifics rather than just throwing a whole bunch of stuff up against the wall. As long as I make it clear to the audience that there's a whole lot of stuff up there against the wall. And you're talking about the BYU picture, right?
Yeah, I am. And we can cover that as more comes out later. So no, you're absolutely right. Because without that fine tooth comb that you went through, I'm being told in the comments, it's Bussey, not Bussey. I don't know if that's correct. The Bussey case. We wouldn't really even have been able to understand it because it was very complex. So thank you for going through that. So yeah, Bussey. I think of Gary Bussey, don't you? I mean, when you see it spelled like that, that's what I think of.
Yes, that's what I think of. That's my only frame of reference.
Yeah, me too. I think so. So, all right, we can move forward maybe into something a little more lighthearted because yesterday was the Super Bowl. I'm guessing everybody knew that. And so I have the question to both of you who were not raised LDS, but you did become LDS as teenagers, and then you had your own families. Did you or didn't you watch the Super Bowl in your families?
No.
No.
Not in my family. I'll bet Bill did because he's a big fan. He's a big Browns fan.
I never get to see my team in the Super Bowl, but I do watch professional football. And as a believing Mormon, my entire side of the family were not members. My family is a sports family. And so we'd go over to my parents' home every Sunday after church and watch the Browns game and enjoy dinner there. And we'd always get together for Super Bowl weekend as well.
Yeah, I put this out on social media, this question, and it really ran the gamut of what families did. Some families, I even knew families like this, they would record it and they would watch it at 12:01 midnight, right? Not on the Sabbath. They would stay up all night and then they'd go to school all tired because they had watched it at 12:01. I know other families
know that it's 12:01 somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. But I guess it had to be Utah time or wherever. I know families that it didn't matter at all. They didn't even think twice about it. They would leave church early to go home for their Super Bowl party, might even shop at the store on Sunday to get the snacks for the Super Bowl party. My co-host Landon told me a funny story. When he was a young married, his home teacher was a former NFL player, and his team was in the Super Bowl on a certain Sunday. And he called up Landon and said, can I stop by for home teaching? This is during the Super Bowl where his team, as an NFL player he had played on, was playing.
The home teacher's team.
The home teacher's team. Yeah, not Landon. He's not an NFL player. Yeah. And Landon was like, you don't want to watch your team. He's like, no, home teaching. And so Landon said, well, okay, you can come over during halftime. That's how dutiful he was. And he said to the home teacher, do you want to even know the score? He said, no, I don't. Let's just continue with the lesson. So some people have a very different take on it. So I was just curious about that. And maybe you guys can comment in the chat if you were in a family that could even watch TV on Sunday, let alone the Super Bowl. And I think it probably depends on what kind of a sports family you were. I mean, if you were, you're going to find a way to watch it. And that's just it. But it kind of made me think about the whole idea of sports on Sunday. And it seems like up to a certain point, it's an absolute no-no. But when it goes into the stratosphere of the Super Bowl, it's okay, right? Because here we have Randy Reed, who everybody loves. Although I have been told that he takes the sacrament during the week, maybe like on Saturday, so that he's not missing anything on Sunday. But I mean, we could do a whole nother podcast on observance of the Sabbath day. I have a scenario I will never forget. When I was a mom with kids that were on a soccer team, it was a traveling soccer team. It was, pretty important. We went to a tournament, and the last day, if we made the playoffs, was going to be on the Sunday. The coaches let us know. And I think both coaches were bishops. They said, we will coach on Sunday, but our boys on the team won't play if we make it to the playoff. And we did make it to the playoff, and the coaches coached, but the boys didn't play. They sat on the sidelines and they cheered on the team. Like, where are you? Where's our right wing? Oh, you're over there cheering, right? Of course, we didn't win. And I will just never forget that. The idea that, I don't know what it was, virtue signaling. Maybe it was a deeply held belief, but they basically let everybody down. And I'll never forget that. It was such an interesting scenario. So it's funny to me. We talk about, Randy Reed and other players that we celebrate playing on Sunday because that's just what they have to do. And then I kind of go back to what I talked about last week and the week before with the bundt cakes. Utah lawmakers race against the clock to help the franchise facing Sunday mandate deadline. It's coming up. The franchise owners have said, I won't do it, and they're trying to put it all into place. It's kind of interesting that they're claiming, we have to be able to worship on Sunday how we will, right? And we need a bill that's going to help us. They're trying to lock down. It's really interesting. I just had to read this little part before we get to more about the Super Bowl. It says the bill, the Franchisee Protection Act, would prohibit a franchisor, like Nothing But Cakes, from requiring a franchisee to open on the day of worship if it conflicts with a sincerely held belief, right? Religious belief under the original franchise agreement clearly includes the requirement. And so nobody ever talks about protecting Saturday. There are many religions that Saturday is their Sabbath, but this is Sunday. The legislation would allow for franchisors to amend a new franchise agreement, which would include a religious day operation requirement. But here's the tricky part. It would prohibit the franchisors from refusing to renew the agreement based on a franchisee's decision not to comply. So they can't do anything about it. You can be open on Sunday if it is your sincerely held belief. If the franchisor violates the statute, then they would be liable to pay damages to the franchisee, civil penalties up to $10,000 for the first violation, $25,000 for the second, $50,000 for subsequent violations. Do you have a comment, RFM?
Just geez.
Yeah, no, geez, this is getting national attention. There are CNN analysts weighing in on this because it's just so crazy. So, and I told you last week, I was there for about 10 minutes and I saw probably about $100 worth of business. It said in a statement from Nothing But Cakes that the customers have given overwhelmingly positive feedback on the requirement for them to be open 7 days a week. And that's what I saw. And I also told you that the franchisor has said, you know what, we'll be open for 6 months. If the market doesn't bear, then we'll close. So it's interesting, this protection of Sunday, this religious observance. And yet when it comes to, higher level sports, go ahead. It doesn't even matter at all. So anyway, kind of interesting. But the other thing that comes up when you talk about the Super Bowl.
Rebecca, before you get to betting, I want to ask you, is there any truth to the rumor that on Saturday, who's this guy in the red again? Randy Reed?
Randy Reed.
See, I follow football a lot. Yesterday was the first
He's an LDS coach.
I've watched this entire season at the Super Bowl. I was glad at least one team decided to show up.
He's a very famous LDS coach.
Yes, and I saw his garment too. So
and he's the one that said his favorite trilogy is the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Pearl of Great Price. He was in the news as saying that.
His favorite trilogy?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
It's like the Bible is just a prequel now. Did he say the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Pearl of Great Price?
Yeah, wasn't that unusual? I'm just hoping people who follow him will Google the Pearl of Great Price.
Not a Doctrine and Covenants fan. But I was asking if there's any truth to the rumor that on Saturday, when Randy Reed takes the sacrament, that he insists on a bundt cake being blessed.
Oh my God. I would insist on a bundt cake. Like, I can't stop reporting on it because I got to Google the pictures and pick one. And I'm already right now craving a bundt cake. So
You're not going to
That one
convince
got Bill's attention. What'd you say, Bill?
You're not going to convince me he hasn't had a few bundt cakes.
oh dear. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to go there, but I understand that he and
But-
Daniel C. Peterson will be settling down to share a cottage by the road together.
Oh my goodness.
Nothing on the joke.
You just have to go there. It is funny though, how people sometimes, people that they virtue signal about their Sunday observance. I remember there was a rugby player that was LDS. It was in the Deseret News, and he was, up to be drafted, and he had said, "I will not play or practice on Sunday." And there was this great article about this young man who would not do that. And then there just wasn't much else. And I don't know if he got drafted or not. I know later it was sort of like, oh yeah, I'll play Sunday. So, there's this big push. And then you kind of realize, what? There are some things that you do with your profession that you have to do on Sunday. And there are other ways to have religious observance. It does not have to be on that day. Originally, the Sabbath was on Saturday. So anyway, kind of interesting. Okay, so the other question is betting on the Super Bowl. I'll ask you guys again. Did either of you, as LDS, did you ever bet on the Super Bowl?
No.
No, never. You
No
didn't.
gambling.
No, and no gambling. And that's what we're going to talk about. This is a great article by Jana Reese where it says
It's
the
probably
church.
because they didn't know where to go to place my bets.
Well, and isn't this interesting? I had this thought because back in the day to bet, you had to go somewhere, right? Some kind of seedy sports track or some kind of scary back room. I don't know how to do it. It's funny that the church talked about the evils of gambling long ago when it was hard to gamble unless you knew how to do that. Gambling's on your phone now. I think a 5-year-old could do it, and they rarely mention it, as we'll see in this article. It's kind of interesting. So Jana Reese says the church is clear. It's a no-no. But odds are that it's a growing number of members disagree, and leave it to Jana Reese to get to the bottom of this whole thing. She says Utah is not one of the 38 states that now permit some form of legal sports betting. In fact, the historically majority LDS state has no forms of legal gambling, not even the lottery, which explains why so many people drive across the border, right? Have you guys ever done that to get a lottery ticket?
No, I've never done that because I could just go across the street to the local grocery store.
That's true. And you don't have to pay tithing on gambling or lottery or anything like that. So
You mean if I won the lotto, I don't have to pay tithing on it?
No, they won't accept tithing on ill-gotten gain. There's a whole list. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
It suddenly sounds more appealing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It does sound more appealing. So, and of course, this is largely attributed to the deep and long-standing influence of the LDS Church, right? But even though the Mormons, the LDS, are not the majority in Utah, they still have, these rules on the books. They're not going to have gambling. I love these pictures. They're just so funny.
So 10% more appealing.
Do you remember this episode over here that I have
Absolutely.
a picture of? I know. I knew you would. Do you remember this from the Twilight Zone, Bill, at all? Yeah, it's the story of an elderly couple that go on a trip. They've waited for it for so long, and the man just gets very attracted to a slot machine. He just can't leave it alone.
And remember at the beginning, this is Las Vegas,
Yep.
circa 1960. And this guy, he remember, he's super self-righteous. He could be a Mormon.
Yeah, he could be.
And he's not going to play the things. He doesn't even want his wife to play him. But then it's like she finds a quarter or something. And is it okay with this? And then it starts happening. He starts getting the fever. And before you know it, this slot machine is showing up in his motel room upstairs and calling his name.
Yeah, it's walking around calling him. I mean, I'm sure it's metaphorical and symbolic, but yeah, I watched that as a kid, and my parents were huge anti-gambling people. I don't know why. None of us gambled. We didn't know anybody that did. But we were like, take note of that. I'm like, okay, I don't want a slot machine to come after me. So the only time I don't gamble very much, I had a boyfriend who was headed to the MTC. We were driving together from California to Utah. We stopped in Vegas. He had his mission money with him that he'd gotten, at the farewell, people hand you money, like, son, here's some, we gambled it. It was great. We doubled his money for his mission. It was awesome. That's pretty much my only successful gambling story. So I know you both look kind of incredulous, but it's true.
Would you like to tell us some of your unsuccessful gambling stories?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to. No, I think I've only gone to Vegas like 3 times and tried it, but that was a funny one. That was just a really interesting one. Okay, let's see. And he was older, by the way, if you're asking why you can't gamble till you're 21. He wasn't going on his mission until he was a little bit older. Otherwise, my story seems weird. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. Here we go. The church has had a consistent, even unequivocal policy against gambling. Its website states, here we go, gambling is motivated by a desire to get something for nothing. This desire is spiritually destructive. It leads participants away from the Savior's teachings of love and service and toward the selfishness of the adversary. It undermines the virtues of work and thrift and the desire to give honest effort in what we do. So something for nothing. The policy then quickly jumps to the worst case scenario, saying that those who gamble waste money, sacrifice their own honor, and lose the respect of friends and family. Deceived and addicted, they often gamble with funds they should use for other purposes, like missions. Such as meeting the basic needs of their family. Gamblers sometimes become so enslaved and so desperate to pay gambling debts that they turn to stealing, giving up their own good name. And again, I think this is kind of an old-timey view of it. I mean, I remember that there was a lot of emphasis on gambling when I was growing up, which is weird because no one really gambled or knew anyone that gambled. Yeah. I remember one time my little sister snuck a mini deck of face cards. I think she won it in a bubble gum machine under her pillow. And my parents found it. And it was like they had discovered she was a prostitute. I'm not kidding. The level of, upsetness. It was really interesting. But I don't really see that so much today. And I think we'll see that Jana says the same thing.
And to put the pin on that, okay, is that one of the reasons, okay, Mormons are not supposed to use face cards.
Right.
I don't know when the last time I heard it was, but, it's in the teachings. It's Joseph Fielding Smith. It's Bruce R. McConkie. It's classic Mormonism. When I joined the church, you're not supposed to use face cards. That's why we used rook cards at my friend's house every Friday night for the party, right? Mormons use rook cards, not face cards, because there's something about those faces that the devil really likes that are going to take you down. And so that's why we're not supposed to use face cards, because the reason sometimes they'll say, oh, it's satanic, but usually what you hear is a little bit different. It's usually, well, these are the tools of gambling. So if you use face cards, you're going to be led down that primrose path to the gambling den.
No, that's it. No, I couldn't really have any cards with numbers on them. I could have pictures, but not numbers. I was the only freshman in my dorm who didn't know how to play any of the games that everybody else was, war and all the fun card games. I was never allowed anything like that. So, but according to Jana, things are sort of changing. So in 2016, 14, and I didn't write which way it was. So yeah, I'm going to have to go back. Okay. 14% of LDS said it was morally acceptable to gamble. But by 2023, 19% are saying it's okay. There's probably not anything wrong with it. Morally wrong in 2016, they said 56% said, yep, it's completely morally wrong. So more than half. 2023, less than half. 44% say that there's something wrong with it and not a moral issue at all, which I think is interesting. 30% in 2016 said, yeah, it's not really a moral issue, but in 2023, 37%, even more, felt it's not really a moral issue. So I think things are definitely changing. And Jana suggests one possible reason of this is that it's a clear sign of secularization. As U.S. society becomes more accepting of gambling and less tied to religious leaders, old school condemnations of it, Latter-day Saints are affected by this too. Cohort replacement. Have you ever heard this phrase? I think this is great, which is a nice way of pointing to the presence of younger people in surveys as older people die, is also a factor. So that generation, like my parents who were so abhorrent of gambling, they've passed on. And the younger generation, like me or younger, or like, I don't really see what's wrong with it. It's not really a problem that I've experienced or know anybody that has experienced. But again, the rise of the prevalence of it. You can get on your phone and you can place a bet, they will take your credit card.
What apps do you recommend for that?
Yeah, I don't know. I just know I've heard tell. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll become a raging online gambler between now and next Monday, and I'll report back. How about that?
That would be great. But by the way, who would access today? I know in the late 70s, I joined the church, early 80s. I'm reading, Joseph Fielding Smith. I'm reading about the playing cards, and I'm reading Bruce R. McConkie. Who today, general authority wise, is even talking about this issue? Anybody? Have they mentioned it for decades?
No, and that's what let's see, Jana says, sorry to be a literal spoilport, but Section 38.8.17 of the Church's General Handbook still says the opposition, including sports betting and government-sponsored lotteries. So yes, it's in the handbook, but you're absolutely right, RFM, exactly. As a general conference topic, the high points of gambling or betting being mentioned was in the 40s and the 50s and again in the 90s. Isn't that interesting? That corresponds well to times when gambling was in the news. In the mid-century period because of a string of gambling scandals, and in the 1990s and early 2000s because of the growing trend of states trying to legalize, like lotteries and riverboat casinos. So they were trying to make a push. Don't let this happen in my town. Then Church President Gordon B. Hinckley, in particular, hammered home this concern, including in a hard-hitting 2005 conference talk in the men's priesthood session, bemoaning the growing proliferation of various kinds of gambling. Hinckley reiterated the dangers of getting involved in it in any way, however innocuous. So in the 90s and 2000s, gambling was mentioned 42 times in General Conference. In the 2010s and into the 20s, it has come up 6 times. So you're absolutely right. But don't you think that's interesting? Because the availability is there. It's completely there, but they don't mention it at all.
As
So
the availability has increased and probably the gambling numbers have increased among Mormons, the warnings have dropped off.
Yep, that's it, which is funny. And so then she says, which is very interesting, given that reality, it's possible that some younger members of the church don't even know about the church's longstanding opposition to gambling or whether something like betting on the Super Bowl would even count, which is why you have that survey where they say, they didn't grow up like I did or like the rest of us did. So anyway, very interesting. I thought sports betting and the Super Bowl. And I had to bring up, when I was growing up, my parents somehow got the idea, and other parents like them, that the stock market was gambling. I know some people have pushed back on me when I've mentioned this before, but this is an absolute reality. The stock market, investing your money, is a form of gambling. I'm talking the 70s.
So my grandmother told my granddad back in the 1920s
20s
before the market collapsed.
Yeah, little did they know that their own church would someday be worth $1 trillion or whatever it's headed for. And then I also had the thought that prosperity gospel, which is sort of tithing, is a kind of gambling. You're putting money into something that, is there a return? Do you convince yourself there's a return? Is it an eternal reward later? It's certainly not as assured as having your money with you. So I don't know, just some thoughts. Any final thoughts on that? And then we'll go on to, I think Bill has something next, or maybe I do. I don't know.
What you're pointing out, that bottom one there isn't paying tithing in order to have a shot at salvation, which hinges on your faith being truthfully the one true church on the earth among a million religions. Isn't that sort of that seems like a form of gambling?
That's what I think. I don't know. I feel that way for sure, depending on how it's presented. But yeah.
By the way, remember Sister Wendy Nelson, the prophet's wife? She told that story. She brought that story back. Who the heck was it? I can't remember. You tell me who that general authority was. Was it Cannon? Was it George Q?
Oh, who paid tithing on his,
who said in a largely unknown statement, except for the fact that Wendy resurrected it, that not only did he pay tithing on what he got, one time he did this thing where he says, I'm only making X amount of money this year. I want to make twice as much money next year. So I'm going to preemptively at the beginning of the year pay twice as much tithing as I did last year. In other words, I'm going to pay prospectively the tithing on the money I want to earn this year. And God blessed me, and I sure earned that double the amount. So that's all you have to do. Decide how much money you want to make, and then tithe it at the beginning of the year, and you'll make that money.
Yep.
As
And
crazy as that sounds, and as prone to abuse as that might be, Wendy Nelson brought that forward again recently. And the only thing that makes it more poignant is that she's talking on behalf of a church that has over $200 billion in their investment account. They have over $200 billion. And she's encouraging Latter-day Saints to pay twice their tithing on the hope that they'll make twice the income.
Yeah, if that's not gambling, I don't know what is, right? And then you have the sunk cost. You keep putting it in. You've put so much in. You can't not do it anymore. Yeah, it's abusive, I think. I think I do actually just have 2 more slides, and then Bill has a really awesome one to end on. So there was one more thing that was out there, just having a lot of fun on social media. The most popular new name for the Book of Mormon. So we renamed the Mormon cricket, right? Well, the elephant in the room, or the Moroni in the room, is the Book of Mormon, right? Now we know that's a proper name, Mormon, but I think most people in the world think it's not. I think they think it's the Book of the Mormons or something like that. So I don't know if there ever will come a day where they're going to rename that. We'll have to see. But so they put this out and they were asking for new names. And what they decided on was, and this probably makes sense to you guys, Another Testament of Jesus Christ.
Here's the thing I want to know. If the Book of Mormon gets a new name, are we allowed to know it?
Yeah. You will know it if you're meant to know it, RFM, but if you're not, you won't. So the funny thing about this, I thought, is that not just Another Testament of Jesus Christ, but abbreviated, really edgy, really cool sounding Testament, right? Just
Testament?
Testament. Yeah.
Here's what I think would be good. When you asked me this question, I thought we can get around the problem with Mormon by saying the Book of Moroni's dad.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. So
I
decided. Oh, do you have any ideas, Bill? What would you call it?
I think we ought to do what Prince did and just give it a symbol and just have it be the art, the book formerly known as the Book of Mormon.
Yep. Somebody predicted that. I put this out on social media and I have like over 400 suggestions. This is a passion project for people. I was really surprised. One of my favorite ones I'll show you is just the Book of Nonsense. That's just the Book of Nonsense. I love that. I know that's probably offensive, but it was cute. Somebody, and I won't read all of these, threw it out to Chat GPT. What would be a new name for the Book of Mormon? And it synthesized everything out there. And it came up with things like Nephi and Co., A Family Road Trip Gone Wrong, Plagiarism and Plates, the Unauthorized Remix of the Bible, A Tale of Two Jerusalems, Swords, Sorcery, and Suddenly No More Steel. The Great American Fan Fiction of the Bible. Anyway, if you guys want, you can freeze on this. It's pretty funny that ChatGPT seems to know Mormonism pretty well, but it is an idea. And I feel like if they did ever get rid of the Book of Mormon, they would probably just go with Another Testament of Jesus Christ.
I like some of these. The Bible, too, with More America.
Yeah.
When in doubt, blame the Lamanites.
Who says ChatGPT doesn't have a great sense of humor? I thought these were great. And again, you can probably find my threads out there somewhere. I got just hundreds of responses and people were so clever. It was really fun. So, all right. I think that's all I have. I think Bill's up for the last segment here.
And I'll be so quick. The Deseret News had an article. So you're a real live apostle, Baptist minister, ask Elder Suarez at a religious forum. And the article says the chat actually began with a short exchange about what an apostle is in the Church of Jesus Christ. I'd like to know what Elder Suarez said to the Baptist minister, because I highly doubt he said, we're the only ones on earth who talk directly to God and have authority. But whatever he said that apostles are called for life so that they serve until they either become a senior apostle and the president of the church or until they live out their lives. And the Baptist minister, knowing that these are the Mormons, now, the Baptist minister doesn't believe that Elder Suarez is one of the 12 only apostles on the earth, right? Yeah. So he leans over and says, hey, buddy, so you're a real live apostle. Roberts began with a friendly smile. That's what they say, Elder Suarez said.
I am sustained as such.
Generating good-natured laughter. Yeah. You're laughing, Elder Suarez, because you're uncomfortable, and he's laughing because he knows you're not an apostle.
Whatever happened to real apostles who said, yes, I'm an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ. I represent him, and only in and through me and my brethren can you see salvation.
One of these guys is mocking the other, and the other doesn't know it.
The other played right into it.
I was surprised he didn't say, well, yes, I'm a witness for the name of Jesus Christ, in which case the other gentleman would have said, what the hell does that mean?
None of us are privy to the actual conversation, which would have Elder Suarez staying as far away from declaring himself an actual apostle, special witness of the Lord, and the only person on earth, along with 14 others, who holds the keys to the only true and living church on the earth.
Here's Mormon think for you. Mormon think is that the apostle in this case, Elder Suarez, should have looked him dead in the eye and said, I've talked to Jesus face to face. Have you?
Yeah.
Then the second part of the Mormon thing is, but he can't say that because this is supposed to be kept hush hush, right? Therefore, he says that's what they say as a way of covering the fact that he actually has seen Jesus. So you can't get away from it. At this point, the church, through their leadership, has inculcated the idea in the members so much that the apostles have seen Jesus, and that's what makes them an apostle, special witness. They can't say anything to disabuse the members of the notion. And it's because they don't want to disabuse the members of the notion.
And guys, when you say that's what they say, it's because you don't want to say you said it. I'm not going to say I'm an apostle.
Yeah.
There's something about talking to this Baptist guy that I don't, a Baptist minister, where I don't want to claim that I'm the actual guy with authority and he's not. So, the other guys say I am, and somebody says I am, but
I'm glad it was a lighthearted moment because the obvious follow-up is who's they?
Well, they use this a lot. In reading all kinds of quotes and stories, they say things like, some would say, or others might question. They remove it one step from themselves. It's a tactic. Once you start looking for it, you will see it everywhere. Some might see it this way, but again, you're saying, no, you see it that way. There is no some.
I'm not sure I recall ever seeing a church that is so embarrassed by its truth claims.
Well, they're embarrassing.
Why believe in something if you're embarrassed to even say you believe it?
Anyway, I thought that was hilarious when I saw it, and that's all I've got.
Oh, that's right.
We have one more slide, remember, where we talk about what we're going to do next. That's right.
Thank you. Yes, I was just thinking, we're at the part where we're going to talk about what we do next. Rebecca, how about you?
Well, let's see. Of course, I always have my Mormonish episode on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. that comes up right after, Monday, the newscast. And I found this really interesting. I came across a question on Faithful social media where someone was investigating the church. And he goes, I like it. I like the people. I like everybody, but I don't believe in the Book of Mormon. Do I have to believe in that to join the church? The answers were revelatory, and we're going to go through all those on our episode tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Do you have to believe the Book of Mormon is historical in order to join the church? It's really fascinating. The Good Book Club, our next book. I love advertising this here. It's so fun. The Language of Fanaticism, Cultish. This is mind-blowing. If anybody wants to grab this, even if you don't attend book club, it's pretty fascinating. So that's what we're doing next month.
Fantastic. And this Wednesday on Mormonism Live, we've got a special subject with some special guests, don't we, Bill?
Yeah, we are going to have the folks over at 21st Century Saints on. They have been working hard over there to try to come up with a process by which they can invite the church to do a better job at safeguarding the Latter-day Saints. Their title for their book is Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the book just makes recommendations about how we can do a better job protecting each other, especially in light of all the stories that we went over tonight that had to do with sex abuse and other things. And so please join us Wednesday, 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time, as we sit down, go over their book that they've offered sort of as a model for how to be better at safeguarding. And also we'll go over the process that they've gone to try to get the church to listen to these ideas, and I think you won't want to miss it.
Well, we won't. I hope not to miss it myself. Also, we're going to go ahead and announce it right now because this Friday we're not doing Mormonism After Dark. So please, please write it on your calendar. It's not going to be this Friday. It's going to be Saturday. Bill's going to be out celebrating Valentine's Day like nobody else. He's got some tickets. He scored some tickets.
I finally got tickets to something. Yes.
To a hot show down there in St. George. It's going to be great. He's going to tell us all about it on Saturday at the same time. It's going to be 8 o'clock Mountain Time on Saturday. We're going to do it. This is special this Saturday, okay? Usually it's Friday. Valentine's Day is taking precedence. So we'll do it on Saturday. Everybody can call in and tell us about your Valentine's Day stories. If they're horror stories, that'll be even better. And we'll listen to horror stories too. Okay. So this is it. Mormon Saints and Sinners. That's it for the Mormon Newscast. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, all of us, for watching. Please join us next Monday for another episode of the Mormon Newscast. That's at 6 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. See you then. Good night, everybody.
Dieter Uchtdorf here. That's a wrap for this week's flight of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you flying first class with us and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast. Doubt your doubts.